Welcome back to the Eagle Countdown, America on the Brink. You just saw Alex Newman, one of these videos. We've got these great allies and folks that have such insight. Alex Newman was one of the speakers, I don't know, was it the Gathering, the recent one, or maybe Eagle Council last year at one of the Eagle Council last year, at one of the dinners. He stepped in, actually. We had someone who canceled last minute. He did the keynote speech. Alex Newman he's written the book on education, that's true, but he's also a great speaker on the subject. Our next guest is Congressman Steve King. He doesn't really need any introduction. The 4th Congressional District, I like to say the name of the number of the district in Iowa, but he's led on a number of issues and been our friend, a great friend of the late Phyllis Schlafly, and great to see you, Congressman King. We're doing this thing where where's my book? We're having the promises kept. We're talking about President Trump in office. His administration has made promises and kept promises, and we're talking about what what's your favorite one? We ask almost everybody, if I remember, everybody who comes on. So what's your favorite promise kept by this president?
You know, it's kind of like going down through the buffet and only getting to choose one thing.
Yeah, I know, it's tough. It's tough. It's terrible.
And as you notice, the video I did, I couldn't discipline myself. Right. I had to go across a whole list of things.
Yep.
But if you want to think about it from a constitutional, historical perspective, a legacy perspective, it's got to be keeping his word on the appointments to the federal bench, especially the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
The Gorsuch appointment, that confirmed it. Kavanaugh, he stood and fought for Kavanaugh. Now we've got a new battle that's on the horizon, and I believe Trump will follow through on that. So I think the legacy is more than a generation long, and we have an opportunity to restore the Constitution of the United States.
Well, and you've cared about the judges and the issues for a long time. We'll get to some of those specifically, but just before we got on and turned the camera back on, you were saying how, boy, it's going to get hot. In the environment we're in, you live through it and you live with it. It's going to get hot. What's your advice to conservatives? Because a lot of us see the chaos and the idiocy and we say, yeah, we're not nasty people. We don't want to be as mean as they are. I mean, what David Horowitz, he just says, fight. We had to learn. But a lot of people are like, it's so ugly, we pull back, and the left comes in and makes it uglier. What's your recommendation? What do you think we're going to see in the next 42 days?
Well, it's hard to give people prudent advice because it's such a volatile circumstance.
Yeah.
But I know this. First, I take you back to the first George Floyd riots in Minneapolis. And when they abandoned the police station, they ordered the officers abandon the police station, and they flew a helicopter in and lifted the last officer off of that police station before they burned it. It was like Saigon.
Yeah, like I was going to say. Yeah, right, exactly.
And then
there probably won't be a big Broadway play like Miss Saigon where they're doing that quite. But anyway, go ahead, keep going.
Maybe not, but the mayor said, well, it's only bricks and mortar. No. It is the symbol of the rule of law, and they destroyed it, and they let it happen. So once that happened, the conflagration went across the whole country.
Right.
And we have to defend our property as well.
Right.
And so I think what will happen is, and this isn't advice for any individuals, I just think what happens is when you have people that want to destroy the rule of law, that attack Western civilization, every value we have, attacking American exceptionalism directly and celebrating it, when you see statues from everywhere from George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill to Frederick Douglass, all being destroyed and pulled off and thrown into the pond. They're attacking everything we believe in. And we have to defend it. We need to defend it with law enforcement and with troops if necessary. And we're not getting that, of course, in the inner cities where we have Democrats running everything. And St. Louis would be one of those situations.
But in the next 42 days, it looks like the Republicans will wait and see. In the Senate, they seem to be they say they're going to be on track. President's going to nominate someone on Saturday. I just saw in the other room, he's affirmed that. Saturday, he's going to nominate someone for the Supreme Court. That will be about 36 days to the election day. Lindsey Graham, Senator Grassley, your colleague from Iowa, was in here yesterday. They all seem to say we're going to do this. If they do, what's it look like for the next 42 days?
Well, it's going to make Kavanaugh times 10.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to be, you can't just measure, we saw it with Kavanaugh, that's as bad as it can be. It can be worse, and it will be worse. And if you add the pieces of this up, if you go back to the George Floyd riots and those demonstrations, or if you go clear back to the ladies in the pink hats that protested Trump's inauguration, they haven't stopped protesting since Trump was elected. And they get better and better organized, they get better funded. So I think you're going to see things that we don't imagine that have already you're in the playbook. I think it's going to be, I'll just say this, and I'll try to say it somewhat delicately, and that is, people have been killed over the George Floyd riots, 30 to 40 people, as I recall from what I've read. I think it'll be worse. I think it'll be worse, and I don't think it's going to be over after the election. I think that might be getting the confirmation in place may just, in all the demonstrations, may just be the dress rehearsal for the protests if Trump wins the re-election.
We're talking with Steve King, Congressman King, of course. I want to ask about another promise kept and ask you, before Donald Trump ran for president for a long time, Congressman Steve King was one of the leaders saying, hey, this question of immigration, you didn't start chanting build the wall, but you were saying we ought to secure our borders, we ought to limit the number of immigrants. We certainly ought to say, as to illegal immigration, we're not going to have amnesty, all the rest. And then President Trump came along, and he's sort of gone in your wake on that. How's he done on promises kept on immigration? I know a lot of folks. So what does he say? 300 miles of wall, and at some there's more to be done. But what's your sense on immigration, on the promises made, promises kept?
Well, it's kind of like if you watch the degree of difficulty when the high diving competition is going on. Yeah. The degree of difficulty is really, really high on this for Trump, and they have fought him every step of the way. And by the way, if I back up, when we had the majorities in the House in the first 2 years of the Trump administration, we had Paul Ryan as the Speaker, we had Kevin McCarthy as the Majority Leader, and I went in to talk to Paul Ryan in the lame duck session. I wanted his commitment to back the wall.
Right.
And as I left that, he said to me, I believe the president deserves the resources necessary to secure the border. That was in the context of building the wall, but that gave him the words that they slid this thing out, and they convinced the president, and I talked to the president directly about this too. I said, have the showdown now, and if we're going to have a shutdown over funding for the wall, do it.
Right.
And but Paul Ryan's advice was, wait till after the election. We'll get you the funding on December 7th, I think the date was. So Trump has overcome a lot to get as far as he
both parties in the swamp is what you mean. But is he doing it? I mean, there's other aspects of the immigration stuff that you talked about, others talked about, that he's been doing more of. I think decreasing the number of visas, the China question, some of the Chinese student visas and things. Is it a promise kept for you?
I think it's a promise kept once you adjust for the degree of difficulty.
Okay.
I would say that I'd like to see a little more action on the Dreamer part of this, because that is unconstitutional. And we're looking to restore this Constitution. I've always wanted to do that. These appointments to the bench are set us on the path to do that. The Dreamers are unconstitutional, and the court just more or less threw that back and said, you didn't follow the proper path to end it. So I'd like to see more of that, but I'm not disappointed with this president on immigration. He has been strong as he could be.
Right.
And I will say that he's surrounded by people that don't bolster this position very much, and I'm watching that. It's hard to, you've got to have the right people around you. If I didn't have a chief of staff that believed the same things that I do, and I'm not suggesting he doesn't at this point, but that's just an example. And when you're surrounded in the White House and you've got people that are undermining that agenda, and some never-Trumpers that slipped in there as well, a few Democrats early, that's been hard to overcome. Yeah. He's got to be very strong to succeed.
Speaking of people around you, my colleague Rebecca Ganner, the executive director of the D.C. office of Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, you had some questions, thoughts?
Going back to the issue of the Supreme Court real quickly, John and Andy Schlafly wrote a great column today in which they talk about the Democrats and how they want to get rid of the Electoral College and add the Equal Rights Amendment. Of course, there's many other things that they hope to accomplish, but conservatives understand how important the Supreme Court vacancy is. And do you think that we'll be able to see a confirmation before the November election?
I pray that it is so, and I believe that we will get this
done. You do?
I do, because it's so imperative. And just dial back to the year 2000 and think, if we'd had an 8-person Supreme Court then, it would have been a 4-4 decision, depending on who you pull out of the court at that time. That creates a constitutional crisis. And a constitutional crisis in the year 2000 maybe was manageable. But in this year, 2020, it's not manageable. We've got chaos all across this country. And if you want to Google Civil War, you're going to see that pops up a lot more than it would have if you did it 10 years ago. The tension in America is higher and higher. We're being more and more polarized. And this is organized and it's funded as well. But there are people that believe the things that they're demonstrating for. If we end up in an impasse, and we don't have a Supreme Court to resolve that, I'm afraid that the chaos will be so great in this country that we may not survive it as a sovereign republic. It's got to happen.
I think you're right. I mean, as you said earlier, that the Republicans in power, sometimes they confound us. You're wearing on your lapel the pin for serving in Congress, and below that the what's called the heartbeat pin, and it's the heartbeat bill pin. See what I did there? And it's the baby, the feet, as well as on a heart. You carried that bill. You moved it got it into the House. Got a bunch of sponsors. It's passing all over the country. To remind our folks, if we get blessed with a president, second term, and a House and Senate, what's possible? What the heartbeat bill is a game changer. I think it also is a game changer in terms of people's perception. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the heartbeat bill, and I'm the only one so far that has introduced a heartbeat bill in the congressional level, but the states have picked this up very well too.
Yep.
And I made the commitment to the heartbeat bill at Phyllis Schlafly's funeral.
Yeah.
Sitting behind the Trump team that was directly in front of me. And I came back and I wrote the bill and introduced it. We had a terrific whip team that came together. And I've always had 100% support from Phyllis Schlafly's Eagles in the uniform. But Tom DeLay came up from Texas to help whip that bill. He was the best whip that we'd ever seen here in Congress, and he demonstrated again. Janet Porter from Ohio has been a driving force there. I went to Ohio and did a movie to support the heartbeat bill. But for the listeners that may not know, it says this, that and before an abortionist can ply his trade, he must first check for a heartbeat. If a heartbeat of that baby can be detected, the baby is protected. And that's essentially the language that's in the bill. There are no exceptions for rape or incest. Those babies are as sacred to God as any other baby is. And we held that to 174 co-sponsors, and easily should have had a markup in judiciary in the previous Congress and floor action. We had the votes to pass it without exceptions for rape and incest off the floor of the House. It was killed by leadership in the last weeks for whatever their reasons are. I never got a reason. But here's how it has to set up to make this work. There have to be 4 windows open in the right sequence. And it can be either the House or Senate first with a pro-life majority, but the House is most logical. The Senate had 1 vote in that Congress that is actually a pro-life vote, and they've got a couple of seats since then, so I think I can define the Senate as a pro-life Senate that needs to be convinced on the heartbeat bill. So that's window 1 is the House majority, pro-life majority. Window 2 is the Senate pro-life majority. Window 3 is a president that will sign the bill. And window 4 is a Supreme Court that will uphold it. And we are either there now or on the cusp of being there right after this confirmation that I'm hopeful takes place any day before the election.
Yeah, but we'll see. Rebecca, you had any more questions or comments?
I've heard that there's talk about impeachment again in the House.
Oh, yeah.
As a distraction, I'm sure, for the Supreme Court vacancy. Do you have any ideas or thoughts on what's to come in the next 40 days?
Well, you've got to read the other side. Nancy Pelosi said they had a lot of arrows in their quiver, but she wouldn't name any of the arrows. So, I mean, who could put their mind into the heads of those people over there? And they have their own fights inside their own caucus, too.
Yeah.
But I think... they really they hurt themselves with this ridiculous impeachment endeavor that they had. They never had a high crime or misdemeanor, and they never had a law that was broken. It was all made up, and it was set up also to have to fit the calendar. They were going to pass impeachment resolution before Christmas, if you remember last year. And let's see. There was the resolution had to be done on time, and they just made up the reasons. And so they just make up the reasons again, I suppose. But when impeachment becomes purely partisan and it's used as a tool to obstruct the agenda of we the people in this constitutional republic, we the people better rise up and throw some people out of office that are pulling those kind of shenanigans.
I think that's a danger.
And another thing I just want to add the Republicans, conservatives, generally accept the results of the election. But you can hear they're already rejecting what they anticipate the results of the upcoming election.
The left is now. Yeah, that's right. I think that's already an orchestrated plan. Okay, Congressman Steve King, for those folks that are commenting and all, I mean, we are. He's one of our great friends on these key issues: immigration, pro-life. One of our people said President Trump seemed to copy many of Congressman King's goals. So it sounds about right. He's been leading on these things, and I don't know what the Lord has in mind about how, but I know you'll be continue to lead on all these things in whatever capacity. So sorry.
I'd say, Ed, that one of the things I did is after the election, it took about 10 days to clear the decks.
Yeah.
Then I sat out on my deck every morning. I watched the sunrise with my iPad, and I typed away like crazy. 62,000 words later, I finished my book.
Oh my gosh, when's that coming out?
Yeah, well, it should be within weeks now.
Wow,
and
good.
The title of it is Walking Through the Fire.
Excellent, good title. Phyllis Schlafly used to say 50% of a book's success is the title, so make sure that's what you want. She really did. Choice Not an Echo was so famously, the title says it. You don't have to read it. Most people probably didn't. I don't know. Anyway, well, great. We'll have you on my radio show to talk about the book, but again, I'm sure your voice will be heard. We're going to